Ahoy, explorer! Welcome along. It's time to search the solar system for the smartest science going. This is a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. My name's Dan. Around here, we look for all the amazing, the mind-blowing, the earth-shattering stuff through the galaxy. And this week, have you ever wondered how your body knows when and how to grow?
Through mitosis, the body grows and grows from a single cell, and all these cells, they form our different tissues and parts of the body. So our bones and our brains and muscles and so on.
And to search for our dangerous Dan, we're headed to the wilds of the Arctic tundra. And in Battle of the Sciences, we're uncovering one of life's biggest mysteries.
Philosophy of biology is actually an incredibly interesting field where we ask questions that scientists often neglect, such as what is life and how can consciousness have evolved in a natural world?
It's all in the way in a brand new Fun Kids Science Weekly. Let's start with your science in the news. A £65 million satellite has been lost in space, gone missing. It was designed and built to spot releases from planet-warming gases, which are made through gas and oil production. The scientists in charge say that communication was lost with the satellite 10 days ago. They're trying to figure out what happened. It was meant to collect data for 5 years on the sources of greenhouse gases, where it's all coming from. So not only is it lost, money has been blown so far. It's a major setback for climate-changing efforts. Just imagine that. Space is big, don't get me wrong, but losing a satellite? Where can it have gone to? There's not a lot of stuff in space. Also, we'll stay up there because the James Webb Space Telescope has sent back its first pictures of an exoplanet. The telescope can see further into the universe than anything else, and it's found something around 100 light years from us on Earth. Now, an exoplanet is a planet not in our solar system, so it orbits a star that's not our sun. This exoplanet is a gas giant called TWA 7b. It's about the size of Saturn. It orbits a star in the constellation of Antela. Experts think it's 6.4 million years old, which they say is young. How awesome is that? That we can see this big slab of rock, a load of gas actually, 100 light years away, and we know more or less how old it is. Genius stuff there. And our final story this week, a flesh-eating fly is invading North and Central America. It's called the New World screwworm. It's causing devastation across farm creatures. Let's find out why. Dr. Hannah Veneer is from the University of Liverpool and can tell us more. Hannah, thank you for being there. Where has this fly come from then?
Well, it used to be all over the Americas, but decades ago, they eradicated it from North America and Central America, but it's still endemic, so it means it's still around in South America. And slowly over the past few years, it's been spreading northwards, which is obviously worrying all the cattle farmers and the governments further north in particularly Mexico and the USA.
These things are tiny, they're flies. How on earth are they making it all that way from South America up to Mexico and then perhaps beyond?
Well, they can fly, they can be taken with the wind, but we think that they might be hitching rides with animals that are being imported through the Americas to North America. So actually, the USA have put in an import ban on cattle from Mexico for the time being to try and stop them spreading.
So tell us about this beast, the New World screwworm. What does it look like? What does it do?
So it's actually a pretty little fly, but it's about half a centimetre long. It's green metallic fly, so very pretty, looks a bit glittery, but it's not a very nice fly. So the females will seek out any wounds, anything smelly on animals and lay their eggs there. And then the eggs hatch and the larvae, which we call maggots, they'll burrow into the animal and feed on the living flesh, which is obviously very painful for the animals, and it can kill them as well. And then once they're done feeding, they'll drop off the animal and burrow into the ground where they pupate, and then they'll emerge again as flies.
It's the start of an infestation, really. I mean, we're thinking that it could be really devastating. How serious is the problem right now?
At the moment, it limits cattle production in some areas. So to keep the animals safe, the farmers have to use chemical control, so veterinary medicines, to prevent the infestations. There's also a huge cost to the government because to keep it out of the countries like Mexico and the USA, they have to release sterile insects, which they have to produce en masse, and it's very costly. So huge welfare and economic concerns, really.
I know the University of Liverpool, you do a lot of work with parasites, with vectors, with disease dynamics. How much does it surprise you that there are insects like this that do such damage because they want to feast on flesh?
Yeah, well, it's pretty disgusting, isn't it? But it's actually quite fascinating. It's a clever way of life because most of the flies, they will feed on organic matter. So maybe like leaf litter or cow dung, something like that. But some of them have now evolved to live on living animals. So it's actually quite clever of them. But I'm always, maybe not surprised, but always in awe of what they have managed to do and what they've managed to adapt to in their way of living.
Do you keep a track on potential invading species and try and predict down the line maybe what's going to happen? For instance, with this fly, did you have an idea of what could be happening a few years ago?
My colleagues in Brazil did. They've been working on this for quite some time, and they have some theories on, whether climate change is causing the flies to spread further, and whether they're actually adapting to any controls that we put in to try and prevent this spread, like the sterile insect technique, where they sterilize the males so that whenever the females then mate with the males, they don't produce any eggs, or the eggs that they do produce don't hatch. But we think that maybe the females are adapting to that. So they're actually quite clever. And colleagues in Brazil have been following this for quite some time. And then in the UK as well, which is where I'm based, our government is really good at checking, conducting surveillance on potential parasites that are going to cause us issues. For example, mosquitoes and midges all around the UK.
Thank you very much to Hannah Veneer for coming on and talking about the impact of the flesh-eating fly spreading across North America. A flesh-eating fly. Let's get to your questions then. If you ever have anything sciencey that you want answered on the podcast, make sure you leave it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app. You can do that at funkidslive.com too. And then I'll get a genius. I'll get an absolute expert to sort it out for you who knows all about it. First up, we've got a message from Ben who wants to know, how do clouds make rain? Well, this is all about the water cycle. You might have touched on this at school. When water gets hot, it turns into a gas. That's evaporation. So this water, now as a gas, is rising through the air because hot things rise because they're less dense. When it gets higher and higher and higher, the air around it is very cold, so it cools down. And then it starts to become proper water again. It's halfway there. And groups of this water clump together to form a cloud. When a lot of water forms into a cloud and it gets colder, it gets heavy. The water droplets become too heavy to stay up there. So they have to go somewhere. So they fall to the ground. That's rain. Then that rain hits the earth. A lot of it ends up in rivers, which flow to the sea, which then eventually evaporate again into a gas. They rise into the sky, which makes cloud. And then the water cycle carries on and on and on. That is how clouds make rain, because water gets too cold and heavy to do anything else but fall in the sky. And often when clouds move to islands and over countries, they'll move up and down with air pressure and with mountains, and that really makes rain have to fall as well. Ben, thank you very much for the question. Let's get on another one then. This is from William. What do you have for us, William?
My name is William, and I want to know how bodies grow.
William, thank you for your question. How do our bodies grow? Why are they always doing it? How do they know when to stop? Shall we unpick the whole thing with Dr. Robert Mahon from the University of Leicester? Robert, thank you for being there. So how do our bodies grow?
Pleasure. Happy to be here, Dan. It's great to talk to you. Well, our bodies form themselves and they're always changing and growing during childhood. And we're actually growing even before birth. So we all start from a single cell inside the womb. And this cell somehow grows to make us into adults. And so to think about this happens, how this happens, we need to think a little bit about how this cell would do this. And so this happens in a process that we call mitosis. And so this one single cell that we all start as, it makes a copy of itself. So it duplicates its contents and then it splits apart into two. And then these two cells can do the same thing again and again and again. And so you get the idea. So through mitosis, the body grows and grows from a single cell. And all these cells, they form our different tissues and parts of the body. So our bones and our brains and muscles and so on. So it's an absolutely fascinating thing. But the main way that the body grows is through mitosis. So it's through cell division.
As far as I know, although each cell would have some form of like nucleus, a middle, it's not like there is a brain in there that's telling it things. It's just kind of going off this information in our DNA. How does it know when to do it? Like, what is the switch in a cell that says, right, now it's time to divide, right, now it's time to split again?
This is a brilliant question, and we don't fully understand the answers to this. Cells inside the body, they have different signals which they might respond to, that might cause them to grow or to go into mitosis. So these are things like hormones. So we have things like growth hormone. So these are signals inside the body that might be sent from, for example, the brain to another part of the body, like your bone. So this might tell the bone that it needs to grow in a specific way at a specific time. But in general, because cells make themselves and they decide to divide by themselves, this is not a trivial question, Dan. It's actually not easy to answer. What we do know, interestingly, is that when things go wrong, unfortunately, that can result in disease. So things like cancer are uncontrolled cell division. So this is when parts of the body start growing in a way that we might not like. And so this is a very interesting area, thinking about how we can form medicines that can stop cells from doing that.
Now, again, this might be a question that we simply don't know the answer to. More on when cells know how to stop. I wonder if they're always trying to grow. For instance, Rob, if I cut myself, maybe there's a little hole in the skin of my arm. If I give that time, that skin will regrow, it will reform. Do we know how a cell knows when to do that? Maybe it's always trying to grow and simply there's no space for it until you have a little scab or a cut.
Yeah, good question. So there's many cells inside the body which are not growing, and these are referred to as differentiated cells. So these cells, they do what's called, they exit the cell cycle. So the cell cycle is part of it is mitosis, like I talked about. So when a cell is growing, it's said to be cycling because it's like cycling around in these different stages. But when it's differentiated, it can sit there and function without always growing. So not growing is also a very important property of cells inside the body. And cells also, as in a bit of an aside, they can also decide that they're not going to live anymore. And this is also very important. So, for example, when a hand is formed, the cells between basically how it forms is like in a disc shape. And this disc shape has digits because cells decide that they're going to basically die in between your fingers. So it's not that all cells are growing. So some are growing, some are differentiated, and some are actually choosing to die as well. And sort of the balance between these things is very important. But going back to your example of a cut, I suppose the short answer is I don't know. But basically, cells inside the skin can sense when they have damage, and this leads to things like inflammation. So the immune system will spot this damage, and it will move there. And it release various different chemical messengers, which will tell some cells, okay, we need to form new skin here. And so these cells These are referred to often as stem cells. Stem cells have the ability to divide into different types of cell.
Just one last question. You mentioned nutrition earlier on today. What are new cells as they're dividing? What are they being made of? Which might sound silly because they're being made of the same cell that they were, but surely there needs to be a fuel. There needs to be something that they can use to build whatever they're making.
So cells are made of proteins and carbohydrates and lipids. And so overwhelmingly, when we think about cells, we usually think about proteins. So proteins are like the building blocks of life. And so they're made from amino acids, and we can get amino acids in our diet from all kinds of things that we eat. So we process these things and we make new proteins with them. And so one way to think about proteins is many of them are little molecular machines which are doing these things inside cells. So like in the last example where we talked about cells sensing when there's damage or passing signals between them, very often there's protein machines that do this. So that's one thing that proteins are formed from. They're formed from proteins.
Well, there we go. So, William, how do bodies grow? Through mitosis. Dr. Robert Mahon, thank you for telling us all about it.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you to Dr. Robert Mahon from Leicester University for coming on the show, for telling us all about how your body grows. If you have anything sciencey that you would love answered on the podcast, make sure you leave it as a voice note for me on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com. Now, our summer of science has started. We did the very first show of the Fun Kids Science Weekly live tour. The other day, we were up in Sheffield in the UK at Crosswise Festival. We had such a good, slimy, slightly explosive and very dangerous time. We had Magna Science Adventure Centre bringing all the experiments. Zoo Lab filled the stage with deadly beasts. And we got hands-on with an actual meteorite. Now, if you missed Sunday's show, it's all right. It's happening all over again for a summer full of science. I'm touring Fun Kids Science Weekly Live all around the UK, playing loads of towns and cities. So if you'd like to come along, I would love to see you there. There's so much exploring the universe. Find out where I'm playing near you. Get a ticket as well. Grab a grown-up, head to funkidslive.com/tour. Now, for this week's Dangerous Dan, where we search for the most weird, strange, unique, and deadly things in the universe, we're headed to the wild, windy world of the Arctic tundra to try and spot the Musk Ox. You'll find this big beast at the top of the world, around Canada, Greenland, Alaska, Siberia. They stand around 5 foot, 4 legs there, just smaller than your mum or dad. They weigh 1/3 of a ton, so they're chunky. Now, this ox is covered in long hair. It's got a coat underneath called a kivia. It's one of the warmest natural fibres on Earth. So they're brilliant, adapted for extreme cold, the wind and the snow that you get in the Arctic. And they can be mean. They've got these thick, sharp, curved horns. They use them to ram and to spear. When it's mating season, when they're looking for a partner, they will use these to headbutt rivals. They have these jaws. It's like armoured plates smashing into each other, driving them away, swinging and charging whoever is nearby. Also, in mating season, they give off a strange whiff, an odd pom. It's how they get their musky name, and they're very defensive and territorial. If they think you're coming near their young, well, they'll charge like a big tank, galloping at 35 miles an hour with those huge spiked horns, swinging, ready to batter and to ram, and with its odd stench, it means the Musk Ox from the wilds of the Arctic tundra goes straight onto our Dangerous Dan list. And for this week's Battle of the Sciences, we're getting a little bit thoughtful in what life actually means. We're asking the big questions, talking about the philosophy of biological sciences with Walter Veit from the University of Reading. Walter, thank you for being there. You have 1 minute to tell us why philosophy of biological sciences is the greatest science around. That minute starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Sure, thanks for having me. I mean, even if you ask biologists, or many, they will never have heard about the philosophy of biology. But the philosophy of biology is actually an incredibly interesting field where we ask questions that scientists often neglect, such such as what is life and how can consciousness have evolved in a natural world? And these are the questions I am largely working on. I'm interested in why there are multicellular organisms, why there are cells in a world, single cell organisms. How could they have emerged from non-living matter? And why is there anything it feels like for these systems to exist? Why is there anything like consciousness? Why do clumps of matter feel pain, pleasure, and the like? Why is there awareness of a natural world? And looking about us from an evolutionary lens, how different creatures evolved can help us to understand this much better.
Walter, that's a minute bang on. Well done. We're asking the big questions with today's chat. Let's start off. How do you and other biological philosophers, how do you define consciousness? What does it mean?
Good. Well, there's some disagreement. We have settled on something like a consensus that it can be understood as anything what it is like to be that system. So if you take a rock, there's nothing it is like for that rock to be a rock. But that's different if you take, say, your dog or a cat. There's something it is like for that cat to be a cat. What are the experiences that come along with that? Say, a dog might smell something, they can see something, and we want to understand what their subjective experiences are like. So that's consciousness.
Now, us as humans, we have evolved a pretty grand consciousness. We know we are humans. We know how we are different from other organisms. How aware do we know other biological life are aware of who they are? Does a dog know it's a dog? Does it know it's a cat, for instance?
Good. So this gets into self-awareness. Historically, we used to think perhaps that consciousness is restricted to maybe humans, only creatures that can take this reflective step back and think about themselves in the world. And maybe that is less true for other animals. However, some animals are able to use the reflection in a mirror to guide themselves in their behavior, to detect spots on themselves. Chimpanzees, orangutans might try on different hats and the like. And it seems like they can use that to really recognize themselves as a self. And even if that's not as rich as humans in their capacity to recognize themselves, they are better than, say, 4 or 5-year-olds. So if you have a little brother or sister, some animals, they will have perhaps more consciousness than them.
You mentioned at the start a rock or a single-celled organisms, very simple forms of life. What level do we think, Walter, that consciousness starts, or even self-awareness starts? How much does a single-cell organism kind of know what it is?
The broad consensus is that there's really nothing for single-cell organisms. We need something like a brain, even if very rudimentary. And so currently, we think the boundary is somewhere, say, in perhaps crabs, lobsters and the like. We call them crustaceans, as well as octopuses, squids. Historically, we didn't think of them as having consciousness. They didn't get any protections in welfare legislation. We didn't protect their well-being. But it seems like they're also able to experience pleasure and pain. When it comes to more rich forms of self-awareness, we can find that in the smartest animals, say crows, corvids, as well as, say, parrots, or, of course, in the mammalian kingdom, us, other great apes, chimpanzees, orangutans. There's a lot of self-reflection going on. You might think of dolphins and the like.
Now, when you're asking these big questions, you can't talk to other creatures. You can't have a conversation and ask what they're really feeling and philosophize. What are you doing every day in your job to try and discover more about how different life forms think?
Great. One experiment that people were thinking about is the mirror test. And there you can have different iterations. And certainly I was there recently at a conference where fishes have been able to recognize themselves and a mark on their body. And the immediate reaction by a lot of scientists was, well, this can't be right. But so I've argued in my book, A Philosophy for the Science of Animal Consciousness, that from an evolutionary perspective, thinking about this ecological life the species lives in nature, what is it doing every day? Well, these cleaner fish that have been able to pass this test actually run something like a business where other fishes come by and they clean them from parasites in their mouth. They clean them, and those fishes need that because it's very uncomfortable to have a parasite like that. And then for them, they get free food, and being able to recognize that is really important for them, and perhaps explains why they are able to use mirrors in this very self-reflective way, perhaps a very rudimentary form of self-awareness.
And my last question, Walter, is always the same, no matter what scientist is kind enough to join us. If I were to throw you forward years and years towards the end of your career in philosophy, what's the one question about biological philosophy that you would really like to answer?
I mean, it would be great to really find the boundary spot of where non-living matter turned into living matter, as well as where non-feeling matter turned into feeling matter. And for this, we really need to think very deeply about biology and evolution. And while I'm a bit skeptical that we'll figure those questions out completely by the end of my life, I think we'll make a lot of progress.
Well, it's been a brilliant case, asking huge questions. You see, that's what science is about, isn't it? It's not just about like hard things. It's about asking these brilliant questions, no matter how. Walter Veit, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, in our questions earlier on this week, we heard about your body, how it grows, how it repairs itself. So let's find out a bit more about that now with one of our favourite geniuses, Professor Hallux. He's at his Happy Health desk this week, answering all of the weird and wonderful things that get sent in. This time we're finding out why our bruises go different colours when they heal.
Professor Hallux's Happy Health Help Desk with support from the Wellcome Trust.
Aha! I've got a call. Hallux's Happy Health Help Desk.
Hey, Professor Hallux. What makes bruises go funny colours?
Ouch! That's going to leave a bruise. If you've had one yourself, you know they can turn almost all the colours of the rainbow as they heal. And it's down to one thing: blood. The bang or the bump breaks the tiny blood vessels under your skin. The blood pools in the tissue and starts off looking a bluey purpley colour. Now your blood isn't blue, it's bright red, but because you're seeing it through your skin, the red tones are lost and it seems much darker. Within 1 or 2 days, the bruise can seem almost black. That's because of how the hemoglobin is changing as the bruise heals. After a few days, as the blood is broken down and removed from the area, the bruise becomes lighter, turning to green or yellow and then faint brown. Most bruises are pretty short-lived and disappear in a week or two, but always tell your parents if you notice a bruise that just won't heal.
Discover more medical facts you've always wondered about on the Fun Kids website, funkidslive.com. Professor Hallux's Happy Health Help Desk with support from the Wellcome Trust.
You can hear more from Professor Hallux wherever you're listening to this show. Give him a search. We've got loads more geniuses with fantastic episodes there for you too. Tons of podcasts that you will love to dive through. They're also there at Google, Apple, Spotify. They're on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com. If you would like to come and see our Fun Kids Science Weekly live show, bringing this podcast on tour all around the UK. We had a brilliant first show over in Sheffield. I'd love to see you through a summer stuffed full of science. Find out more funkidslive.com/tour. And Fun Kids are our children's radio station from the UK. Listen all over the country on our website, on the app too. And if you've got a smart speaker, wake it up and ask it to play Fun Kids.